If you've ever thought owning a flagship phone is impossible considering the quite hefty price, well, you're in luck because the Redmi Note 14 Pro might just be about to change that. At $220 or 350,000 naira, this may look like your regular budget phone with consistent caveats. But what if I told you this phone can compete with an actual flagship phone which costs about $1,000,000 naira or $1,000? There have been quite an amount of phones dubbed the flagship killer, but they still manage to screw up one way or the other. However, this phone in particular doesn't just pass but nails every aspect of a great smartphone: the design, display, performance, software, battery and cameras. So let's kick things off with what you get in this proper heavy-duty packaging. Considering the approach a lot of these modern flagship phones are going for, you can clearly see why I'm excited. This is probably 4 times the size of, say, an iPhone 16 box, and that's because inside you get the phone. Not only that, you also get a protective case. I kinda like the bland opaque vibe here. A couple of manuals, a USB Type-C cable, and finally, a fast charger. Let me be honest here, this is probably the most elegant Redmi smartphone I've ever set my eyes on. If you compare it to last year's Redmi Note 13 Pro's design, it's a definitive upgrade. The phone looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, without being too in your face like those gaming phones from Asus and ZTE. The rear of the white model is made from silicone, which surprisingly doesn't attract fingerprint smudges. However, that isn't the case for the black model, which has this sort of glossy aesthetic, but there's a case provided in the box just for that. The sides of this phone is made of steel, so I guess that should take this phone's durability to a whole new level. You couldn't even bend it if you tried. The camera is also packed in this neat centric camera island, which practically eliminates every sort of wobbling, which is one of the major improvements from last year. Speaking about durability, this phone is very strong. Not only does it have a steel frame, it's protected by Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which is still strong in 2025. This phone also supports IP68 waterproof rating, which Redmi promises should make this phone stay under 2 meters of water for 24 hours. I don't think anyone should even spend that long underwater, but the point is that design and build quality is flagship level, no doubt. And if you're enjoying this video, then kindly click the like button down below and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. So the design is good.
Okay.
What about the display? It might not come as a surprise to anyone because the screen on budget phones are getting better and better. There are 120Hz AMOLED panels on $150 phones right now, which is pretty cool, especially when you consider the fact that 2 to 3 years ago, this was basically impossible. But with this phone, there are much more improvements. The Redmi Note 14 Pro brings a 1080p AMOLED display with a 120Hz refresh rate. And though these are the modern standard nowadays, this display is now protected with Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which basically means that things which could previously cause a deep gouge would just cause a lighter scratch. And the display is freaking bright. I thought 1700 nits on the Infinix Hot 50 Pro Plus or the Technospark 30 Pro was crazy. However, this phone gets up to 3000 nits.
Oh my god!
That's so bright that even in the scorching sun, you should get an almost perfect viewing experience. But that isn't the only thing I love about the display. The bezels are also very trimmed down, which is cool. It's clearly not yet to the level of the iPhones or Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, but it's still very impressive how streamlined it is. That, combined with the hole punch cutout, should provide an impressive content viewing experience. That was impressive considering how vast the price gap between this phone and more expensive smartphones are. But the performance is an entirely new story. And this is an area which brought my attention to this phone. Budget phones a few years ago had the tendency to lag, heat up and perform terribly. It was actually expected, and some years down the line, it's one area which I saw constant improvements. But this phone makes others look like they're not even trying. Behind this phone is the MediaTek Dimensity 7300 Ultra. When I discovered it, my jaw basically dropped. This is the same chipset which powered the likes of the Realme X7 Pro and the Oppo Reno 5 Pro. It's very powerful, and when you use it, you would notice it almost instantly. Combined with 512 gigs of UFS 2.2 storage and up to 12 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM, multitasking is a breeze. You can run as much as 20 apps at the same time and it won't lag. This is probably the one reason why I call it the true cheap flagship. As you can see now, if you export the same video from an editor on this phone and that of the Redmi Note 13 Pro, the Note 13 Pro isn't even close, which is awesome. Gaming is beyond fantastic. You can run titles like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG Mobile at extremely high settings and it runs at an unhinged 60 frames per second. If you want to push this phone, consider running Call of Duty Warzone or Genshin Impact and you feel the phone struggle a bit. These are very demanding games, and if you want to run at its best, crank the settings down a bit. During prolonged gaming sessions, the phone does get warm, but it's nothing too serious. Okay, so the performance was pretty cool, but in my opinion, the software is the coolest thing about this phone. The Redmi Note 14 Pro runs HyperOS slapped on Android 14, and this is probably the most intuitive user interface I've ever seen. Now, I've seen a lot of UIs, but this one hits hard and is very different from others because of how customizable things are. You can customize the phone with consistent AI features. There's an AI wallpaper generator which can generate wallpapers using text prompts. The options aren't so deep, but it's good enough to be usable. You also get an AI assistant which can use to control your phone hands-free by simply using your voice. There's also loads of AI features on the gallery like the magic eraser which can use to remove objects or the ability to swap out the sky in images. It has this sort of AI vibe to it, but it's still very impressive. And as a cherry on top, it supports up to 3 years of software updates all the way to Android 17. But what about the battery experience? I personally feel that the 5000 mAh cell is the industry standard, but this phone takes it even further. All that you'll be doing on this phone is powered by a mega 5500 mAh battery, which is insane. You can get a lot of battery out of this phone, but I think there's also something else to consider. This phone has a really bright screen, a really strong chipset, so that should sip more battery than normal. But since this is 500 mAh more than usual, it will last as long as the competition. And when it's time to charge, you are getting a 45W fast charger. It's a downgrade from the 7W from last year's Note 13 Pro, but that is good because lower charging speed means that it's less likely to harm the battery and cause unnecessary overheating. And the 45W isn't as slow as you may think. It charges this phone from 0% to 100% in about an hour and 20 minutes. Before we talk about the cameras, let's take a look at the extra features. This phone comes with an under-display optical fingerprint scanner which is quite fast. It also has an IR blaster which turns it into a TV remote, and it supports dual stereo speakers which are very loud and capable, especially while gaming. Now, I want to make something really clear. What makes the so-called flagship killer phones fall off is when you look at how good the cameras are, and they aren't great. So let's see if this one is just as good or doesn't make any sense at all. The Redmi Note 14 Pro brings a 50MP main camera, an 8MP ultra-wide camera with a 2MP macro camera. The photos are very good in good lighting, as well as quite a few low-light scenarios. But the most important thing here is the video. The 50MP camera can shoot up to 4K 30 frames per second, which is quite okay. You get electronic image stabilization to help keep things steady. On the front is a 20MP selfie camera which shoots in 1080p. Although it's stabilized, it's quite underwhelming that we don't get at least 2K video. So I can see that the camera comes with a bit of a catch. The Redmi Note 14 Pro honestly surprised me. This is a budget phone, but you are getting a flagship display with flagship protection, a very powerful chipset, amazing battery life and very good cameras. The cameras aren't perfect, but I feel I've gotten enough good stuff to take that as a letdown. I will recommend this phone to anybody. It's actually a no-brainer. Do you know Infinix made a foldable phone which is just as impressive as it's affordable? It's $600, which is literally half the price of others. To check it out, click the card on the screen and I'll tell you all about it.